gonna make some chicken and dumplings today. I'm gonna bring you along and show you how I make some. That's fairly simple. So far, this is the frozen chicken that I've thawed out, the kind you get in the bags that are breast meat halves. The water got it, sorry for my messy state, a little over halfway. I'm going to let this come to a boil, and I'm going to add some seasoning to this too. I'll show you what that is in just a second. I'm going to be using the minced onion, sea salt, black pepper, the Goya adobo, the McCormick Montreal chicken, and a tiny sprinkle of the brown sugar bourbon, just because I put that in everything. And I don't really measure this. You just sprinkle it until you hear the voice of your ancestors whisper, "Enough, child." Now, you really don't have to use anything other than salt and pepper at this point, but I don't like plain tasting broth, and I will be using the broth from this chicken for my dumplings. So I wanted to go ahead and season it now so that the broth is good and flavored. And I'll just let this boil until the chicken is done. When the chicken starts floating, it's almost done. I actually drained it into this bowl because my thing holds on there, but I poured it in this big bowl to sit while I chop up my chicken meat and get it ready for dumplings. Okay, cut all the chicken up, got all the little fat pieces off. And I broke it all up and put it back in the chicken broth. And I'm going to let that warm up to where it's almost boiling. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to mix up the dumplings for the mix. All-purpose flour, which I've done it with the self-rising flour and the all-purpose, and I've done it with a mixed. Usually I'll just use whatever bag of flour is almost empty, to be honest, just to finish it off. Mix it half and half, typically. Half water, half flour. And just dip it into your boiling water. I'll show you that in a second. At this point, there's the water or the broth that's in there is just barely covering up the chicken in the bottom. So if you have a can of broth or jar of broth or whatever, you can add that, but I'm poor. I don't keep broth around very much, so I'm adding a cup or two of water just to give it more room for the dumplings to fall in when it starts boiling. I got it about this far from the top. Added about, I think it was 2 cups of water maybe. Just enough where the dumplings have room to move around when I boil them. Get this just barely to a boil, and then I'll add the dumplings in. I'm not giving you all the measurements on the seasonings because it wouldn't be so easy if you had to measure everything out. Now this is the water and flour mix. It's about the consistency of pancake batter. Cake batter, maybe a little thinner than cake batter though. As soon as it starts boiling, I will start dripping some in for the dumplings. Okay, that was a little bit too runny, so I did add some more flour that I sifted. Now it's more like pancake batter. Don't worry about how runny it is, but I am going to go back through and try to get some more of these lumps out, because you absolutely do not want any lumps in this, or you'll have a little powdery spot in one of your dumplings. This is almost at the boiling point. I'm going to drop a dumpling in there and see if it'll sink or what it does. That's okay. Everybody need to show on it. I'm terrible. Now, you can't see it. As soon as the dumpling hits the hot water, it'll form. Alright, let me do a few more. That was not a good example. Okay, try to keep this on the actual pot. Dumpling, dumpling, dumpling. Ooh, I just made a mess. Dumpling, dumpling. You don't want to make your dumplings too big, or it'll take longer for them to cook. But everywhere that your dough falls, it'll form a little dumpling. So I'm gonna turn this up and try to get it boiling a little bit more. I've got it on about 7 right now. And once it starts boiling, I will turn it back down immediately. That just helps heat the broth up more. And because I added water, it took a little bit longer for the broth to heat back up to boiling. Now that I've got a few in here, let's see if we can find one. Just pulled up. But do you see how the dumplings are already forming? The hotter it gets and the more I put in, the better they'll stay formed too. And those little ones that don't form into a big one will just make it more like gravy later. Now this is a fairly easy way to make chicken and dumplings. I just used the frozen chicken breasts and did the broth from that and added a little bit more water. If I had a bigger pot, I wouldn't have to do that, which I need to get one. But I'll bring you back in just a little bit and show you the progress. See these dumplings. You can experiment with the different types of flour. Like I said, I've used the self-rising flour and I've used the all-purpose flour. And right now, if you ate it like this, the dumplings would taste really plain, but I'm going to do something else to it here in a little bit. So I got to turn it down some, because you got to be real careful once it starts boiling and you start adding the dumplings. You got to keep the bottom stirred up so it doesn't scorch, because that will ruin the whole pot if you let it scorch on the bottom. Trust me. I know this from experience. Now I've about got too much in my pot, so I'm going to try to squeeze in a few more dumplings if I can. I got to get me a bigger pot. While I'm doing this, I'm going to tell you a story. One time I went to my grandma's had dumplings made. And I sat down, got me a big bowl, and found a rubber band in it. I'm like, what in the heck? We all had a good laugh about that because my grandma and grandpa had been shooting rubber bands at each other and had lost one of them and didn't know where it had landed. I found it in my bowl of dumplings. Now these are pretty simple ingredients. There's been times when I've made poor man dumplings where I didn't have any seasoning at all except for salt and pepper and a little dab of bacon grease for flavor. And I've also made some when we was really poor that I called virgin dumplings. And that was dumplings without any meat. You might get that joke later. But yeah, I'll tell you what, that big pot of virgin dumplings fed 12 people. And we didn't have anything to eat at all, and nobody knew what to fix. And I went in the pantry and pulled out some broth and some flour and an onion. And I made some virgin dumplings, and everybody thought they were eating like kings. Put a little bit of love in it. Just try it sometime. When you're desperate, you'll do anything. Now this is what I call not your grandma's chicken and dumplings. And I call it that because once I get all my dumplings made here, I add a secret ingredient that most people would probably think is gross. Like, oh, that does not go in chicken and dumplings. No way. But I'm telling you, it makes it oh so delicious. And it's like the best dumplings you've ever had with a little sweet kick to it. Now, up north y'all may not like something like this, but down south we like our sweet stuff, so this won't be for everybody. But I encourage you to at least try it. I'm adding a cup of sugar. And I know that looks like a lot, but depends on how much you're making. You can add a little bit more. I'll overlook my bacon grease. That was from breakfast. Not empty it yet. But here is my version of chicken and dumplings. Now we only do white meat because I have picky eaters in my family that only like white meat. That's me. I'm the picky eater that only eats white meat. So my dumplings have all white meat. You can do the same thing with the chicken broth, chicken legs. Just boil them and drain the broth off and get the meat cleaned off of the bone, and you can use it the same way. That's a big old dumpling there. Look at that. Yeah, I'm going to turn this on low heat and just keep stirring it for a little while and let it thicken up. Taste test and maybe add a little bit more seasoning if I need to. There you go. This ain't your grandma's chicken and dumplings right there.